Mathilde Loisel was married to a poor government employee. She was a romantic woman, full of dreams. She was as vain as she was beautiful. She often stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself.
These shabby clothes don't suit me.
She sighed deeply. She began to satisfy the wishes that real life could never fulfill through her fantasies. In her daydreams, Mathilde became a completely different woman. She wore a beautiful dress, sparkling shoes, and a fine handbag. Jewels shone on her neck. She was a graceful lady, the center of every ball. In her imagination, Mathilde was full of joy, glowing like a shining star. She felt loved, admired, and perfect. But when the dream faded, she returned to her small, shabby, and poor life. Then she felt like the saddest woman in the world. Each day, she lived between happiness and sorrow, crossing between brilliant illusions and harsh reality. One day, her husband, Mr. Loisel, came home from work, smiling and holding an envelope.
Look, we've received an invitation.
He said, expecting Mathilde to be happy. But when she read it, she became angry.
A party? I have nothing to wear.
She shouted.
This invitation is for women with pretty dresses.
She threw the paper on the table and began to cry. Mr. Loisel felt sorry for her.
How much money do you need to buy a nice dress?
He asked. After calming down, Mathilde replied,
Maybe 400 francs?
That was all the money Mr. Loisel had saved. But he gave her the 400 francs, and she bought a beautiful, expensive dress. Mathilde wasn't happy. She had a beautiful dress, but no jewelry to go with it. Looking at herself, she felt deeply sad. She thought,
I'm the unhappiest woman in the world.
Tears began to fall again. Mr. Loisel was puzzled.
What's wrong, my dear? Why are you so upset?
He asked. Mathilde replied,
What good is a beautiful dress without a necklace? If I go to the party with no jewelry, everyone will see how poor I really am.
Her tears flowed even harder. Then Mr. Loisel had an idea.
Wait, what about your friend, Madame Forestier? Why don't you ask her to lend you a necklace?
When Mathilde heard this, she quickly stood up, wiped her tears, and rushed to her wealthy friend, Madame Forestier. Madame Forestier smiled warmly and opened her jewelry box.
Don't worry. Choose anything you like. You can borrow whatever you want.
Mathilde tried on every piece of jewelry in the box, spending a long time in front of the mirror. Then she asked hesitantly,
Is there anything else?
Of course there is. Just wait a moment.
Madame Forestier kindly brought out another jewelry box. Inside was a single piece, a sparkling diamond necklace. Mathilde fell in love with it at first sight. Her heart pounded as she carefully placed it around her neck.
Can I borrow this?
She asked. After Madame Forestier gave her permission, Mathilde clutched the jewelry box tightly and hurried back home. The night of the party was magical. It was January and snow was falling outside. The cold winter air was harsh and gloomy. But inside the party hall, everything felt like a dream. Just as Mathilde had imagined. Beautiful chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm golden light all around. The room was filled with joyful, excited people, making it feel bright and full of life. The hall was crowded with elegant women. In glamorous gowns and sparkling jewelry, they danced gracefully, smiling as they moved. But one woman stood out among them all. That woman was Mathilde. Among all the ladies, she was the most beautiful. Not only the men, but even the women whispered about her stunning beauty. Mathilde became the star of the ball, and she knew it. She was truly happy. What she had only dreamed of was now real. It was no longer just her imagination.
This is real. My dream has finally come true.
She looked as if she had been born to be the queen of the ballroom. This was the happiest moment of her life. Time passed quickly, and soon it was time to wake from the dream. But Mathilde didn't realize that this dreamlike moment was about to end. She had no idea that what awaited her next would be more painful than she could ever imagine. By 4 a.m., the ball was ending. Ladies in fur coats began leaving the hall one by one. Mathilde and her husband hurried out as well. They didn't want anyone to see her old, shabby coat. The early morning was still dark. The winter wind was sharp and freezing. As they turned into a narrow street, the wind howled like a wild animal. The cold cut through their skin. They tried to find a taxi, but none were in sight. No one stopped for them. With no choice, they began to walk, step by step through the biting cold. Finally, near the Seine River, they found a taxi. Inside, they sighed with relief. Mathilde thought,
This must be the coldest wind I've ever felt.
back home, Mathilde stood in front of the mirror. She didn't take off her dress right away. She wanted to see herself one more time. Then, she screamed. Her husband rushed to her side, shocked. Mathilde stood frozen, her face pale with fear.
What's wrong, my dear?
Her husband asked urgently.
The necklace. The necklace. It's gone.
Mathilde cried. Her husband went pale and stammered.
What do you mean? The necklace is gone.
I'm sure. I'm sure it was still there when we left the ball.
She said, trembling.
When you put the coat on my shoulders, he touched it then.
Mathilde collapsed onto the floor, speechless and distraught. Her husband froze, unable to speak. After a moment, he finally said,
Maybe you lost it in the taxi.
Mathilde didn't answer, staring blankly ahead.
Could it have fallen on the street?
Still no response. She covered her face with her hands and sank down slowly. Her husband grabbed his hat and gloves.
I'll go look for it,
He said, braving the fierce wind once again. It was morning when her husband came back, but he had nothing in his hands. The couple was deeply worried. They had no idea how much the diamond necklace would cost. First, they wrote a letter to Madame Forestier. In it, they said the necklace's clasp was broken and that they would have it fixed before returning it. Then they began searching everywhere. They visited the taxi company. They put up missing posters. They placed ads in the newspapers. They combed the streets day and night, asking people around. But it was all in vain. One day, they saw a necklace in a famous jewelry store. It looked just like the lost one. Without hesitation, they went inside and asked for the price. The jeweler said it was 36,000 francs. They begged him not to sell it to anyone else until they could raise the money. Now, their only task was to find 36,000 francs. Mathilde and her husband went everywhere, begging for help. But in the end, they had no choice but to borrow money from a loan shark. With that money, they bought a diamond necklace and finally returned it to Madame Forestier. But from that moment on, Mathilde's life changed completely. Before, although poor, they lived quietly on her husband's income. Now he had to work 3 jobs, day and night, without rest. Mathilde worked hard too, cleaning houses and doing tough labor to pay the interest. They moved out of their apartment to a small attic room, cutting back on food, sometimes skipping meals. Mathilde worked late into the night and cleaned early every morning. Buying new clothes was impossible. She couldn't meet friends, and even spending time with her husband became very rare. Their life was full of pain and endless work. Paying off the debt became their only goal. 10 long years passed. They finally paid back all the money, both the necklace and the interest. But Mathilde had changed. She looked much older than her age, as if she had aged 10 years in a blink. Her soft, beautiful hair had turned dry and tangled, like melting chocolate gone hard and brittle. Her clothes were ragged, but life was so hard that she didn't even notice. On her way home after paying the last of the debt and interest, Mathilde quietly walked to a bench in the park and closed her eyes. Even during those hard 10 years, she never forgot the night of the ball, the happiest night of her life. Tears welled up as she closed her eyes again. There were many people in the park, but Mathilde looked like someone from another world.
I paid all the debt, every franc, even the interest,
She whispered as if dreaming. Before her eyes, the ball appeared once more. She saw herself in a beautiful dress, wearing a diamond necklace. Then her friend Madame Forestier walked toward her, smiling with grace and elegance. Mathilde opened her eyes, surprised. Madame Forestier had never been at the ball.
Ah,
Mathilde let out a short sigh and began to sit back down. But then, not far away, she saw Forestier again. Mathilde opened her eyes wide and looked once more. This time it was real. It was truly her friend, Madame Forestier. Mathilde stared at her for a long moment. Then, as if she had made up her mind, she stood up and walked straight toward her friend. Her heart was pounding.
Forestier. It's me. It's been so long.
She called out, her voice trembling. Madame Forestier turned her head and looked at her.
Ah, I'm sorry. Who are you?
It's me, Mathilde. Don't you remember? It's really me.
Mathilde? Mathilde.
Forestier's eyes grew wide with surprise.
Oh my, is that really you?
Still unable to believe it, she grabbed Mathilde's hands tightly.
Mathilde. Look at your hands. Why are they so rough? What on earth happened to you?
Mathilde quietly told her everything about the necklace, the money, and the 10 hard years spent paying off the debt. Tears welled up in Forestier's eyes as she listened. Then she said softly,
Oh, Mathilde, that diamond necklace was not real. It was fake.